It's all in the planning with Erik Pickering, episode 99. Are you ready to make your law firm a profit-generating machine that will free up your time and skyrocket your impact? With more than 2 decades of business growth experience and having proven that you can be successful while prioritizing your family and your impact, introducing the Profit with Law podcast. I am your host, the creator of the firm differentiator 10x effect, Moshe Amsel. Well, hello and welcome to another episode of the Profit with Law podcast. I am your host, Moshe Amsel, and today is another awesome, amazing, stellar guest interview, and I'm really excited to be able to cue that up for you. But before I do that, I just want to share with you, back in episode, let's see, what episode number was it? In episode 96. In episode 96, we introduced an idea that lawyers are leaving money on the table, and what I was referring to with that episode is the ability to position your knowledge as an asset for your law firm as opposed to your efforts and your service to your clients. And there's a ton of opportunity that is out there that is being missed, ignored, and forgotten about, that when done properly could totally flip the script for your law firm. And I want to invite you to join us in a one-day event, June 15th, where we're going to go through and outline how this works and how you can make this possible for your law firm. This is a way to get more revenue without needing to market more, without needing to find more clients, without needing to increase other efforts in your practice, and just literally start collecting money that you had the opportunity to collect before and you just haven't been doing that. So you want to join the Unlock the Hidden Revenue Stream one-day summit we're going to be putting on June 15th. And you can sign up for the waitlist for that at profitwithlaw.com/waitlist, profitwithlaw.com/waitlist. And now I'm just going to queue up I have a separate intro that I did with this interview, so I'm going to queue that up right now. For those of you tuning in for the very first time, this podcast is run twice a week. Tuesdays, we do a solo episode by yours truly, and Thursdays, we try our best to bring guests to you every Thursday. We've been seeing an increasing demand of those guest slots, so hopefully we won't have any gaps for you moving forward. If you enjoy the show, make sure to hit that subscribe button and subscribe to the show in your podcast player. This way you get notified when we go and release the next episode. So I'm really happy that you're here today. One of the things, I named this podcast Profit with Law, and it wasn't just a tongue-in-cheek name. It's what is the reason that you're running your law firm? The reason you're running your law firm is to generate a profit. You want to have cash thrown off from that law firm to be able to do the things you want to do. Money is a tool, and we want to have more of it, not because we're greedy, but because that's going to allow us to fulfill all of our goals and our life's dreams. So whether it's a personal, you want to upgrade your house, upgrade your car, live a freer life, free up some of your time, or you want to be philanthropic, or you want to leave a legacy for your kids, grandkids, great-grandkids, whatever your motivation is, money is the tool that's going to help you get there, which is why I named it Profit with Law. We want to help you be profitable with your law firm. And that's why I was very excited to get the request from Erik Pickering, who's the president of Tracers, to come on the podcast. Now, I learned about Erik through our COVID live stream series, and we had him on one of our live streams. But he made an impression on me immediately because he is a true business person, business mind, really understands how business functions. And I said, you know what, we really need to get Erik on the show here because one of the problems I see in the legal industry is that law firm owners, and you guys are telling me this all the time, we're not taught business in law school. You don't have an MBA, most of you. Not that an MBA means anything, by the way, but you don't have the training to understand the intricacies of business. So you're left to your own devices to try to make your own parallels, your own correlations from what you've been exposed to, what you've learned, what you've seen, and often bring your own bad habits and the bad habits from your previous experiences into your law firm. And my job is to try to enlighten you, to try to bring new ideas, new perspectives. And that's what we're going to do today with Erik. So let me tell you just a bit about Erik. So Erik has over 30 years of experience in running and growing businesses. Like I said, he's currently the president of Tracers. Before that, Bridgewater Associates, the world's largest hedge fund. He was the president at First Advantage, Amazon.com, Booz Allen Hamilton, and Procter and Gamble. He earned a I hope I got that right, by the way, Erik. If you were the president of one of those companies. Wow. Really amazing accolades here. He earned a BS in mechanical engineering from University of Washington and an MBA from Harvard Business School. So, Erik's the real deal. Let's have a conversation and see what he has to share. But before we do that, Erik, what I like to do is I like to color your life story, how you got to where you are for our audience so that they know who you are. So I don't want you to launch into an entire autobiography, but if you can just give us some flavor on your journey so that we get to know a little bit more about you before we actually talk about business and law.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, well, it's very exciting to be on, and I just love the opportunity to kind of just talk about the topic. I'm pretty passionate about it. So, and then my background is I have been, up until Tracers, I've been part of big organizations, and starting out at Procter and Gamble and managing teams, making laundry detergent is what we literally did. But it's one of the best managed companies in the world, I think. So starting there was amazing. And then, each of those companies you talked about was varying degrees of growing something. So First Advantage was US Search, was another data company. And Amazon was back in the day, like 20 years ago, when it was a startup and growing. Each of those, and then lastly at Bridgewater, each of those experiences was, I was able to see how companies are run by people that run really amazing companies, basically. And then at Bridgewater, I really came to really believe this approach to that we'll probably talk about today, of this, like, what's your goal in life and whatever, and then how do you achieve it. And it really struck me that I didn't want to work for big companies anymore, and I wanted to be an entrepreneur, and I'd always wanted to do that. And so when I left Bridgewater, I went out on my own, and the reason I like talking about this topic is because I feel like, even though I've been around, feels like forever, 30 years, I'm just now having to do it myself, in a sense, meaning, like, I got to set this, or no one else is going to do it. Everyone, I am totally in charge of how this company is run. And it's been, and it's enlightening, because it's sort of easier said than done when you walk in, here's the way you run it. And so anyways, that's why I like talking about it. And that's sort of how I got to where I am.
Awesome. So quite the journey, and quite a change to walk away from, quickly growing startups and step into, I guess, what you're dubbing podcast business, right? I'm not sure. I think Tracers, because we had Shannon here on the podcast. I'm sorry, Sharon. Shauna. Sorry, yeah. I screwed that up. I apologize.
I have a lot of guests.
Shauna, please forgive me. We had Shauna here on the podcast from Tracers, and so she talked about the company, and so I know that you guys have been around for 20 years. So how does that compare to the companies that you were working for and the work that you're doing there?
Well, it's actually surprisingly similar, because although the company has been around for 25 years, it's, I bought the company 3 years ago, and the it's it's like a startup because it was this successful company for 2 decades. And but like most companies that have one founder and they run it for 20 years, they end up doing like the exact very specific thing, and it just gets narrower and narrower almost as time goes by, because that entrepreneur sort of sees the success and thinks this must be what the right thing to do. And it was successful, but there's a ton of opportunity to do different things. And you come in with a fresh set of eyes and you look at the assets and you sort of have this canvas. And with Tracers, we have this amazing data and we have this amazing customer service and how to handle and solve people's problems. And then we can go after 12 different verticals. So it's really felt like a startup in that sense. So it's been closer to the ones where it's a small team and you're figuring out, you really have to do that. Like, I mean, I would say like Amazon. Amazon was just launching toys when I was there, and you were just having to pick like, what are the best opportunities, because there's so many, you
Right.
really have to focus. So it's been more similar to that. It's been fun.
All right. So I'm assuming that the process that you think that law firm owners should follow in thinking about their business and envisioning their business is probably a similar process to what you're bringing to Tracers. Is that correct?
100%. Yep.
So what is that process? Why don't you share that with us?
Yeah. So I basically ripped this off from Bridgewater, the principles. I don't know if your listeners have read that, but it's all about sharing like the best way to approach. It's really an approach to life. I mean, it's called the management principles, but the it's a 5-step process. And I always feel like this is on one hand totally obvious, but when you hold it in your head as this is the approach I'm going to take, it's really helpful, because without a process and a framework, you essentially just deal with what hits you in the face. That's your MO, is whatever hits you that day is what you're going to do. So the 5-step process is figure out what your goal is. So think about independently, like when I said I wanted to be an entrepreneur, like I had not connected with that part of myself until it was just beat into me. Like, what do you really want to do? And so what's your goal for your firm or your life? And then the second thing is then come up with what you think is the best plan. You are closest to it. You understand all of the intricacies. So what is the plan you think is best? The next thing is to then have people that you trust and know poke holes in it. So don't just do it in a vacuum, but like get experts and get everyone sort of build this ecosystem to say, that's a bad idea, here's some good idea, here's some new things you can try. Fourth thing is just go do it. So work your tail off and have processes that you have goals, and so you understand the progress you're making. And then lastly, build in the step of pause and reflect on what's happened. What'd you learn? How'd it go? Where'd you fail? Where'd you succeed? What's changed? And then start over. So it's so again, on one hand, it's very basic, but that is, and you can do it for your life, for your family, for your law firm. It really works anywhere.
Yeah, and I love that. And I want to point out something, and that is the obvious and the basic and the things that we think that we know inherently are always the things that elude us, right? I'm a coach, right? I don't call myself a coach, but I essentially help law firms grow. And in that position, what I am is an outside perspective, kind of like you brought a fresh perspective to Tracers.
100%.
How I serve is I'm an outside perspective, and I hold a space for the law firm owner that they don't have for themselves, which is to help them uncover what they're already seeing in front of themselves, but they're missing it. It's kind of like, the reticular activation system. So you're driving along the road, and there's a ton of cars on the road, and you don't pay attention to any of them. But then you're shopping for a car. And so you walk into the Lexus dealership and you got your eyes on a particular car, and you look at it and you're like, oh, I really want it. And walk out of the dealership, you're like, I'm thinking about getting it. And all of a sudden, everywhere you go on the road, you're seeing that same exact Lexus car. There's one. You never noticed it before. And it's that kind of thing where just bringing it out into the conscious, bringing it forward and paying attention to it is what makes it something that you now can use and put into action. Another thing that you said everything that you said has a lot of parallels to a book that I talk about here on the podcast all the time. So there's a book called Living Forward by Michael Hyatt and Daniel Harkavy, and In that book, Michael and Daniel lay out this idea that when we go through life, we get into this drift, right? So when we don't have intention and we're not aiming for something, we just allow life to happen and we drift along. And if you can imagine that example, so you're out in the open sea and you're drifting and you get nowhere, right? You exist, but there's no real reason for your existence. You're not getting anywhere. You're not going in any specific direction. And that's what happens in life, and that's what happens with an owner who doesn't change his vision, doesn't change with the times, doesn't see the other opportunities. So, sticks there for 20 years. It's just drifting along, allowing the business to exist and allowing it to create whatever fruits of the labor it creates, but missing potentially a massive opportunity that they could have had they just put their eyes on it and set their sights to it. So that book, Living Forward, is all about planning out your life in different domains of your life and being intentional about it. And it's a great book.
Let me just
Sure.
add a few things to what you're saying, so one is, I think your listeners have a huge head start, or maybe they're just wired in a way to really benefit from this, because they know they're searching for ideas. That puts them way ahead of the majority of people. Just don't even look. They have no source of input, for here's what I should be thinking about. So they are showing a desire, they have acted on it, and it's really then how do you put that in a framework to then do something with that. And then I just to make law firms feel better, I probably met with 100 companies before getting involved with tracers. They all have this problem of you just get stuck drifting, hit whatever hits you in the face you're doing, and you think you're making progress, but you're just sort of, you're a leaf on the stream, as opposed to you're a boat and you know which direction you're going. So it's very similar.
Yeah, absolutely. And I, I talk about goal setting, and I talk about, having the analogy that I like to use as a GPS, like you get, I would have used the analogy of a map, but people don't even know what that is anymore. But if you want to get somewhere, you have to know your destination. You got to know where you're starting from, and you got to have a route to get there. And you also need to know what to avoid. There's pitfalls along the way. You got to recalculate. You got to, road closure, recalculate, right? Otherwise, you end up making a lot of U-turns, going a lot of circles. And we can use that analogy to really comprehend and understand the power of needing to have a goal and needing to have a plan to get there. And I love that you have a step in your process to share it with other people and allow them to poke holes in it. And I would love it if you can just spend a little bit of time there on what does that look like for somebody who's further along. It's obvious, right? You get your team involved, right? And bring them all to the drawing board and say, here, this is my vision. This is what I want to accomplish. This is my plan of how to get there. Now tell me what's wrong with the plan. And there's probably a science to get them to participate, because they're afraid of, putting your plan down. So That's one conversation. But the other one that I'm curious to have, and is because I know that there's a lot of listeners here who are solo, or very small. They don't have a large team of people to collaborate with on these ideas. How do they attack this, with getting outside input to say, yeah, there's these problems here?
Yeah. So there's, let me just start by saying, it can be super easy. So like it's, although it is its own step, and it's, it can be as simple as everyone has, friends, peers that you work with, or, you're recommending people that you tend to also personally like pick one or two, and you have to have there's a like-mindedness, like back to your listeners. Like I bet anyone in your listening sphere probably would be like, yeah, open to the idea. That sounds interesting. Yeah, I would love to hear your plan. And then for me, the examples you chose, like I do have a leadership team at the company. We work through all this. There's a quarterly planning. Everyone has input. We talk about pros, we go through that very, pretty rigorously. But you're dead on in terms of it's just different getting from your team and your direct reports versus peers. So I'm a member of one of those, like it's called Vistage. It's one of those groups where other presidents and CEOs, and you basically have 12 people, and once a month, I spend a full day doing just this. So what's the topic? How are you handling that? And there's a discipline to you have to come prepared. I mean, you're like,
Right.
here's the topic. We're going to talk about how are you handling this from a pivot to this thing. And it forces me to pull this up. Oh yeah, that's my, okay. And it's a guardrail for me because it's like human nature is to be the leaf on the stream. It's far
Right.
easier to sort of roll along, and I'm a kind of person who likes spreadsheets and a plan. So I'm wired a certain way, so it helps. But
Right.
I still, I'd rather just sort of, I'm just doing things. I feel busy. I've had this question. I've talked about this before, but for solos, it's the peer group. Start a meetup group. Start up I think it's people, and it's fun. It's fun. It's bonding. You can make friends. I mean, there's a really way to bring. I like these people that I meet with once a month. I think of them as my closest people because I spend 8 hours a month with them. Which is a lot of
Right.
time, but it's hugely valuable.
Yeah, absolutely. And that highlights the value of being in a community, whether it's a free Facebook group, whether it's a listserv somewhere, whether it's a local bar association or a local networking group, but just being part of a community of like-minded business owners or people who are on a similar journey as yours, that you have somebody that you can pick the phone up and run something by. At the same time, I think that you need to be really careful about who you select to share your idea with, because friends and family are not always the right choice, right? They often they don't have the same mindset as you. Like, they're not entrepreneurial. They're risk averse. They're going to potentially shoot down your idea from a perspective of, yeah, that's just something that I would never do. So you shouldn't do it for X, Y, and Z reason. So you got to really be careful about, that you're selecting people who are in the right space. And you did say that, that it should be like-minded. I'm okay if it's even not exactly like-minded, but that they're in the same space. So if it's a business owner question, talk to other business owners. Don't talk to your spouse or you definitely should talk to your spouse, but there's I think that there's a divide between sharing with your spouse, unless your spouse is your business partner, but sharing with your spouse what you're doing and asking your spouse for advice. When you ask for advice, it should be advice that they are equipped to give you, not the advice that they're not equipped to give you. Because if they're not, like, for example, for me, my wife works for the government. She works for a paycheck. When I set out on my own, she thought that, or she still thinks that entrepreneurship is gambling. And, so that's her perspective coming into it. So I don't share questions with her that I want feedback on a business decision, but I do share with her, oh, I'm hiring this person and this was the experience in the interview process. What do you think of them? Because in her job, she evaluates people all day long. So she is perfect for giving me feedback on somebody's personality and what somebody might be hiding, and and stuff like that, because that's her area of specialty. But if I want to know about, I'm targeting a goal of $500,000 for the next quarter, and I want to know what she thinks about, my, where I'm heading, like, that number would just scare her, and she'd be like, no, you're spending way too much money on marketing, and it just would not be a conversation that would be appropriate for me to have with her. So I think that it's important to ask somebody about it, but it's also important to pick those people carefully in that process.
And then so I couldn't agree more. And then the way I think about that question is basically almost anybody can give you insight on some aspect of your plan. And you want to look at each person and look at what are their ideas? What are they think they know things, and can talk to you know who they are, and you talk about them, do you believe their ideas and you agree with them? And then what's their track record? So what have they done? So those two things combined, because when I sort of retract like-minded, I don't like-minded. I just mean like somebody who's running a company that's doing $100 million in revenue and has done this 3 times in a row. There's a track record of this is not an accident.
Right.
They're able to do that. Maybe their ideas, I disagree with some of them, but I take that as, and I weigh that, here's the parts that I can ask for input, and then how believable is that person, and giving me feedback on that, and taking all that in with that filter is couldn't agree more.
Yeah. And I want folks, my listeners, I want you to understand that I honed in on this and chose this to ask Erik about because for me, it was a new idea, a new concept, not because I didn't know inherently in my gut that I should be doing that, but I'm not doing that right now. I'm not practicing that. I shouldn't say that. That's not accurate. I'm not practicing it with my team. So I am involving my team in the planning process, but I'm not asking them for feedback, for them to poke holes in the idea, for them to give me their own input. And that's something that I should be doing. I am in a coaching organization, so I do have a network of people, of peers and coaches that I do run these things by. So I am definitely asking for input. So it would be wrong for me to say I'm not doing that. But it has opened up my eyes to the fact that there's more to that I should be doing intentionally that I'm not doing. And if I am guilty as charged, then probably some of you are as well. So that's why I wanted to hone in on that specific point. But Erik, I want to pull back a little bit. I know that from having you on that COVID live stream that we did, and having conversation with you before the interview now, you have some really strong opinions about the messaging in the marketplace for small firm owners right now dealing with the pandemic and in general with running their business. And I couldn't agree more with some of the things that you're sharing. And I wanted to give you an opening to talk about that because I think that we're folks like myself as leaders, where our job is to help people see the potential, help people see the positives out there, help people see, what is possible, and move away from your fear and negativity so that you can be focusing on something positive to move towards and forwards to. But at the same time, I think that because of that, because that's the message that we lead in the marketplace, we may be doing a disservice by discounting or ignoring the pain, the reality, and maybe where somebody might be headed, even if they do and try all those things that we're sharing. So I wanted to ask you to give your opinion and your side of it and share that with our listeners.
Yeah, great. So yeah, my view is, and again, using the 5-step process, whether it's in COVID times or regular times, understanding the foundational thing is understanding the reality that you live in. And like you and I were talking previously, I think there is a sort of an overly optimistic view right now, but that gets in the way of potentially dealing with the facts. So I don't know if you've seen there's the hope for the best, plan for the worst, which sort of to me ends up meaning sort of be optimistic, and it has more of a flavor of that. And then I don't know if you've seen the Stockdale paradox, which is this guy who was a prisoner of war for 8 years and wrote this book on how he survived. And it was his flavor of it was, you have to have an unwavering faith that you're going to come out of this stronger than you were before. But you simultaneously, which is why it's a paradox, have to deal with the brutal facts that are facing you right now. And I think that's I'm more in that camp, which is if you go back and watch the movie The Big Short and see the time frame of actually the cracks in the housing markets happened like 3 or 4 years before the 08, 09. And you look at them in hindsight and like, well, that seems obvious, but
Right.
everyone's a leaf on the stream, and stock market's up, so I'm not going to worry about it. So, my view is there's.
And I'm going to interrupt you for 1 second. It's just like, I don't know how many of you have seen it, but there's a YouTube TED Talk out there. Well, it's on YouTube, but it's a TED Talk that Bill Gates did on the risk of the pandemic and how the pandemic is the next thing that's going to be. And that was in 2015. And in that TED Talk, he literally lays out exactly what's playing out right now, like to the T. He talks about how the market's going to act, how our resources are going to be depleted, how we're not going to be able to have the tests that we need, and like he literally lays out exactly what we're going through, and we, it's not like we didn't know about it, and we our lack of investing in healthcare as the leading capitalist country in the world is it's like Warren Buffett says, when the tide goes out, that's when you find out who's been skinny dipping, right? The tide's out right now, and our true colors are showing to the world and to our country. So I think that highlights what what you're saying. Like, we're, even as a country, we're doing that. We're the leaf on the stream.
Right.
We're ignoring the problems, and there's other problems out there that we know we're ignoring.
Yeah. Well, and I think the that analogy, your the Bill Gates, that thing is pretty amazing. And I mean, the reason I say this, because again, I don't like coming across as negative, and I feel very negative versus the average person who's talking. But the reason I say this, and I like telling people, is to not be part of the herd. I mean, now is one of those moments where if you can independently think, and I like recommending movies. I love picking things up for movies. And the Big Short, I watched that again. I'm like, how did I not see that? But you
Right.
put your information in from your sources, and you don't see those data points. So it just ties back to, to your point, at any point in time, small businesses need this system of what's your goal, how are you achieving it? That's all. It's just, and it's missing by and large. And then at this specific point in time, it is so much more important to have that in place so that you can deal with the uncertainty and the things that are coming at you, because there's a lot more risk of the stream. So there's a stream that's just flowing like the last 10 years in your leaf. And anyways, maybe you could have doubled your business, but you don't really care. And now there's a stream that is going to dry up in a lot of different ways. And you just need to, the more you engage and take control of that, that is a huge side benefit of this, is for those out there, and I certainly have waves of this, of just sort of being freaked out, and stuck, and more feeling like a victim as opposed to in charge of your destiny. Like, having a plan and doing it is extremely liberating, and it's the best cure for any of that sort of like worry and depression. And so it's important for all those reasons. And again, it's to position it, you were saying earlier, and I really like this, to position it less about like COVID, what am I gonna do, what am I gonna do, and just more about this is my business. And there's some current conditions that I'm going to factor into that, but approaching it from a broader spectrum is also sort of a nice brain vacation from, what's hitting you from CNN every 3 minutes. So I like it for that reason too.
Yeah, and I think that this goes right into your 5-step process. But I think that if you think about your big picture, long-term goal for your law firm, where are you headed? What is it that you really want? If you have that clearly identified, and then you can say, okay, what do I have to do in the next 5 years, 3 years? Break it down to 1 year. Like, what is my 1 year goal in order to achieve this 5-10 year vision that I have for my firm? If you get really clear on that, now this pandemic is a blessing in disguise, because it's going to now force you to think about, how do I make that happen in ways that I wouldn't have otherwise considered. One of the things that I'm dealing with my coaching clients, and I'm also working on getting messaging into the marketplace for, is this idea of using your knowledge as a source of revenue, not just the service you can provide as an attorney, but you have a distinct knowledge set that people are willing to pay to learn from you. And those are people who may not have otherwise engaged you as an attorney. So there's this client journey that people go on, and all along the way, there's solutions to their problem that don't necessarily involve them retaining an attorney. And you have an opportunity to, at the beginning of that journey and at the end of that journey, to sell information that people would be willing to pay for, even if they weren't going to hire you. And I think that if you start to rethink your business model as looking at your client and what they're going through and what you can do within the realm of your practice area and your knowledge set to bring that to them, suddenly you can start to sell things at scale. Like you can record an information course that's helpful to them, and sell that, and you make it once, and now you just need a selling system to put that into place. And naturally, it leads people from there into retaining you as an attorney. So it's a new revenue, not only a new revenue source, but a new lead source for you as well. And then what happens after they're done with you, right? You service your clients. What happens now? There's always an opportunity for a subscription type product at the end, where now you can start introducing recurring revenue that people are paying month in, month out to have something. Now, whether it's a support group, whether it's access to you in another way, whether it's access to information in another way, depending on what your practice area, there's a lot of different things. I mean, let's say you're a tax attorney, right? People want to always be on top of the latest and greatest tax information. They don't want to rely on just the fact that I have a CPA that does my taxes, therefore I don't need to know anything. No, you need to know everything so that you can go to your CPA and say, hey, is this something I can do? Because your CPA doesn't know the days in and out of what's going on in your business, and you're coming to them at the end of the year and saying, hey, okay, what can I do? It's too late. Right? You could have done stuff throughout the year. So if you're a tax attorney, you're helping somebody through a problem. When they're done, you say, hey, by the way, for $50 a month, you can join me on a webinar once a month, or have access to this blog post once a month where I'm sharing what's in the newest information about what's out there in the tax code. And boom, now you've got this recurring revenue. People want that, and they can want that at the end. They can want that at the beginning, right? It could be somebody who never needs a tax attorney, but they want that information as a business owner. Now you've got a product that you can sell, something that gives you access to clients you would have never had before. And I think that if we start to recognize how much information we have and the value of that, then we can start to create these other revenue streams, these other business models around what we do. And the COVID pandemic is just an opportunity because, hey, maybe people are not retaining my services for $10,000 a pop. But maybe I could find 100 people who want to spend $100 a month to get access to me. And now all of a sudden I solved that problem today.
When I love I really like the way you framed that whole point about you don't this doesn't mean you have to change your goal. Like particularly the way, the people that are actually sort of have the process ingrained, they have a long-term vision, a 5 and a 3, which is what we have. And the way the way that played out for us is our sort of vision is sort of being the bringing the customer service and our data, our two best assets, and basically solving our customers' problems with their data. And what we have sort of immediately there's such a pivot which we've done, and maybe it'll be long-term, maybe it'll be short-term, but is realizing, hey, there's a remote work part of this, which is we can enable people to be, to get their job done, to be productive. And then there's a cost savings part. Both of those two have never been part of our forward, here's what we're doing for you. But they make sense now. They make sense in general. And so, we're putting that into who knows where we'll end up. But right now, those two things are really important. And then I just think I would say I'm jealous of attorneys in general, because there is such a need for advice, and attorneys are by default a trusted source of any advice, even though oftentimes that's probably, they don't know anything about a specific topic. But I just say personally, I trust any attorney's advice, and whether it's evictions and getting people prepared for, hey, you did the groundwork a third of Americans didn't pay their rent. Just send this letter to your landlord showing that you're on top of it and trying, and here's the things you're doing. And I don't know if that'll help or not, but I would like, if somebody gave me one of those for my business, and I sure I'm going to send it to my landlord and say, trying to keep people employed in the spirit of the federal government, blah blah blah, I'm asking for rent abatement. It's so I'm sure we could sit here and rattle those ideas off, but acting on those and picking one, that's
right.
That's the key.
Yeah, and there's a ton of those ideas. If you're serving business clients, there's a ton of confusion right now of how to navigate the CARES Act and the different tax benefits and the loans available and all of that. you could be supporting your clients, even though the first thing, I mean, I had, clients of mine say, well, I don't know anything about it. And I looked at them and I said, well, neither does anybody else. Right? What do? They read the act, they stay on top of it, find your information sources. Other people are not seeking the information the same way you are. You're seeking it in a way to get clarity, to know what's going on, to be able to share that with your people. So you're basically a news reporter. You're taking the information, you're taking all the inputs, you're organizing it, and then you're producing an output. And that output is valuable to the people that you're providing it to. And you can charge for that. You can, and for those of you who have headphones in, you could probably hear my dog barking. I apologize. The mailman must be delivering the mail. But you can provide a very valuable service, and it's like that across the board. Estate planning, there is no better time than right now that people are worried about their mortality. As a matter of fact, there's been numerous articles about the increase in online estate planning creation, for these companies that offer you to do your own online. Well, guess what? That's a huge opportunity for you to go out there with a message of why an online estate planning software is going to leave you hanging, or is going to leave you exposed. And then you do an information session on how to do estate planning from your home while using an attorney to figure out your specific needs. You highlight the risks of doing it yourself. You show why you're needed. And then boom, at the end, you're like, okay, listen, we can do this for you remotely. We can do it now. Book a planning session with us. And it just gives you have to look at all the things that look like they're risks for you, and all the things that look like it's the end of the world for you, and figure out a way to spin it and turn it to be something that you can use as an asset. And what I really like, Erik, is the fact that you're like, well, you got to think about the worst case scenario. And I couldn't agree more. Like, you have to plan for the inevitable. You have to plan for the possibility you might have to lay people off or furlough people, or have a plan for what happens if this doesn't work. And then, but also have a plan of how you're going to get out of this and how you're going to avoid these pitfalls, right? The United States needed a plan to deal with a pandemic that they could execute on. They don't have that. They didn't have that. And we're seeing the results of that right now. But had they planned for it, it would have been a worst case scenario planning routine. It would have been like, we're wasting our time. They would have felt like they're wasting their time. But imagine how many lives could have been saved if we had the plan in place and we had execute on it. Now, obviously, you need buy-in from the citizens of the country. And if they had closed the borders and made everybody stay at home before this thing got to where it is, we wouldn't have understood the potential, and we would have said, oh, it's just a common flu, and there would have been a lot of pushback from the citizenry. So that the plan would have had to be one that the country is participating in the planning process. And I think we can take that parallel to our business, right? You have to share the worst case scenarios with your staff. You have to go through this exercise with them so that they understand that there's a purpose for it. They understand when we hit play, when we start furloughing people, it's to save the law firm, and your job's secure as soon as business comes back. We're going to bring you back. Or we have a plan where you bought in to the fact that you're going to work for free for 8 weeks, to give us the breathing room that we need to try to turn this thing around. There's a lot of potentials that nothing is off the table. And you got to bring your team into that planning process and let them see the worst case scenarios so that they also feel the motivation to make that not happen, to avoid that from happening. And I think that you're very wise in highlighting those holes. And it goes back to that step of ask other people for their ideas and provide input, and that input is supposed to poke holes in your rosy best case scenario. And I think that's the fact that you have that step in there, it highlights what you're trying to do here, which is, hey, don't ignore the risk, don't ignore the reality of the situation just because there is a potential rosy opportunity. Pursue the opportunity, but also plan for the worst. And I love that.
Yeah, that's right. I to build on your point about bringing the team in, over communicating. So having that plan and then over communicating and making, in times like this, like shortening the window. So you're planting the flag 30 days out, 60 days out. Here's the rallying cry. we're going to switch to, we're going to enable people to work from home. We're going to make them cost efficient so that they can, maybe they do have to lay off a paralegal, but they can do the work themselves so that the firm stays alive and they can bring that person on. And like, that's the rallying cry. We're going to do the changes in messaging and marketing and email to make sure that we all understand it and what's the most helpful. So, and then just beating that drum. So we just started a town hall every week. Everybody gets on a Zoom, and it's just, there's just a lot of uncertainty, and it's hearing the plan again is helpful. It just grounds people, but then you're also given the opportunity to talk about fears and, whatever new government thing came out. So over communicating that is, it's really, I don't know about you. I do feel like my family's coming out of this stronger because we're forced to spend so much time together. You got to make a break. And I feel like it's a similar opportunity for companies in terms of it really does bring you together if you treat it like a family and are talking a lot and just sharing with reality and dealing with it. So,
yeah. Well, listen, I've got a 2-year-old here, so I'm not so sure she's going to come out of this stronger because one of us might kill her before this is over. But folks, we're not going to really do that. But she's really trying our patience at this point. But I absolutely agree, and I've really come to love the fact that we've gotten to spend so much time together on under one roof. It's not really under one roof. My teenage daughters, I have one that's not a teenager. My 20-year-old, 18-year-old, 17-year-old are over at my parents' house, and it's a story for another day. But the social distancing from my own kids. But we're video chatting. We're trying to video chat every day and get have the little ones talking to them so that they can stay connected. But it's definitely rough, and but you have to look for the silver lining. You got to look at what the and not to keep it too rosy, but to just not ignore the reality of the situation. And if you only allow the negative to rise up, if you only allow the fears, you only allow that stuff, that's a very rough place to live, and you can't carry that forever. You can't carry, at some point you're going to break, and you need to have these other things to offset that. You need to be able to focus on something positive. You need to be able to keep busy with something, and that's I think the key message here is have a plan, review it, poke holes in it, but then execute it so that you give yourself something that is at least going to give you a chance. And go ahead.
Sorry, I was going to say one that spurred a thought, which is, we often spend a lot of time talking about what are the new opportunities are different because of and I think there's also just an equally important bucket of how do you do your work? Because nobody likes to, and I think maybe attorneys even more so, don't like new tools or change and so there's a really big barrier to wanting to try new tools and new ways of doing things. But I think that's probably as powerful as looking at new types of work to how you're doing your work and testing and, okay, here's 3 things that are there that I've sort of thought before that just start doing it and use the time. It's another flavor of how you come out of this stronger. Because again, maybe it's related to what's going on. Maybe it's not. I've just made a pivot of 2 of my leadership team, pulled one out, so having her do a whole new function of 100% focus on that because she has extra time because part of the part that she's managing is the traffic is down on that part or whatever. And we're going to learn for 2 months and then see where we come out the other end. Maybe that's a full-time slot. Maybe it's only an hour once you get it set up and running.
Right.
But similarly, I think there's a lot of power in tools and technology and data, and how do you just pick one and try it, use this as an opportunity.
Yeah, totally. I agree. And also taking this time to create processes and formalize what's happening so that the flavor is the same for every client as they go through the process. And you can also set yourself up so that you can install another person into that role and they can hit the ground running because all of this is defined and laid out and the tools are in place. So even if you do have the worst case scenario, you do have to let somebody go and then you have a staff rotation when business comes back, you have now prepared yourself to have that staff come back quicker, faster, more efficiently, and run your practice more efficiently in the process. I definitely think that there's a lot of, and again, this goes back to, look for the opportunities. If you're busy, you're busy. do your work. Just keep at it, and just be thankful for where you are, and maybe this is a time for you to grow. There's a lot of good talent in the marketplace because there are other firms that are not busy and people have lost their jobs. So if you're busy, look at bringing people on and offboarding some of that work from you, and looking for ways to make yourself even more busy. But if you're not busy, if you find that things have dried up, and you don't want to shift in another direction, you don't want to introduce a new product, you just want to take it easy right now, then look at your internal processes, your internal systems, see if there's new technology you can introduce, play around with it. Take this time to definitely focus on that. Love that, Erik, as well. All right, so we're running out of time here. I'm going to give you two opportunities right now. One is to just share one key nugget that if somebody's zoned out through this entire interview, what is the one thing that you would like to share with a law firm owner today that they should take moving forward to really take to heart, implement something that can help them? And then anything that you want to share as far as where somebody can find out more about you, your company, or anything like that, feel free to plug that after that.
Okay, great. Well, so if I were to distill it down, I think I would say if you do one thing, it's figure out what that 60-day, force yourself to pick the one thing that you think is the most important goal for the next 60 days. Because that sort of distills everything down. To get there, you'll go through these, at least mentally, this process, and then that will. I think that can give you some momentum to then go forward from there. And if you can just hold on to that, and once a week put in a process that you put a calendar that just, am I still working on that? And just and then ask, and then do it. I'm gonna listen to the rule. That's my one thing. Tempted to throw three more things, but I would say that's it. I mean, I think that's really helpful and important. And then, I would love anybody that has questions, doesn't have somebody to poke their holes in the plan. I'll pull a closing plan. You can reach me at Erik, ErikP at tracers.com anytime. And if you're interested in what we're trying to help in terms of remote work and cost savings for legal data research, you can go to tracers.com. And what we're doing is you can come on for 2 weeks, try it, see if it's achieving either one of those goals. And then for this week, you get $100 off. So once you come on, then you save more money on your searches that maybe you can use that to flesh out one of these ideas we're talking about. And you can just go to tracers.com and podcast 100 and tell them Erik sent you. Easy peasy.
Okay. Hopefully, when this releases, you still have that running, because I didn't give you a date.
That code will work. So
okay.
Yeah, as I know there's a timing thing. So yeah, but that'll work. Yeah.
All right, perfect. Erik, thank you so much for your generosity, your time here. I really enjoyed the conversation, and folks, take it to heart. Just the 5-step system. I was missing a step, so add it in. But you've heard me talk about it before. You got to start with a goal in mind. You got to have somewhere where you're aiming. And there's, everything that we do in life is an analogy to that. Like if you want to succeed, you got to be aiming for something. And even if you miss the mark every time, you're going to get far further in the process if you had something you were aiming for than if you were just going through the drift, just going through day to day and letting the business happen to you, letting life happen to you, letting your customers control you, letting your employees control you. That's just not a good place to be. So, and I love this 5-step process that Erik shared with us. So definitely, if you need to go back and re-listen, do that. If this is your first time listening to the show and you enjoyed it, or even if you didn't enjoy it, I would love it if you subscribe to the show. But definitely, if you enjoyed it, hit that subscribe button so that you get notified in your podcast player when we release a new episode. We release at least 2 episodes a week, Tuesdays and Thursdays. Tuesday, it's just me, yours truly, sharing what's on my mind, maybe something that you've asked for. And on Thursdays, we bring amazing people like Erik onto the show. And I'm really enjoying the ride. I'm enjoying the process because I'm getting to meet a lot of amazing people. Erik, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for coming. And until next time, folks, focus on your profitability. Focus on how you can take more money home not just how you bring in clients, not just, you got to decrease the expenses in the process or not increase them while you're bringing in more revenue. So make sure that you're always looking at the bottom line when you're doing this. And I will see you next week.
Thanks so much.
Thank you for tuning into the Profit with Law podcast. Your feedback is extremely valuable to us, as well as helping us reach more people with this valuable content. Please leave us a rating and review in your favorite podcast directory. Join us again next time when we are back with even more strategies to profit with law.